Originally, WEP was introduced to Wi-Fi to provide Wi-Fi with a level of privacy somewhat equivalent to what was found in wired LANs, and hence the name WEP. Because in wired LANs, there were cables that were providing some inherent security, as signals were found inside the cables, compared with in the case of Wi-Fi, where it is an inherently broadcast medium. However, it soon became clear that WEP doesn't even provide this level of security. And it's not so much in the cryptographic strength of RC4 itself. RC4 is the cipher that's used in WEP. However, it's more about certain other problems in the way that the keys are used. For example, one problem with key usage in WEP is that the same key is used for both authentication and privacy. Cryptographers consider this to be a very bad practice. You don't use the same keys for authentication and privacy. You should use different keys. So this rule of thumb was not obeyed. Furthermore, the lengths of the keys were not long enough. At first, WEP was just using 64-bit keys. Later, it was extended to also allow for 128-bit keys. However, of these 64 bits or 128 bits, 24 bits are actually coming from the initialization vector. This IV, or initialization vector, is often unchanging. Since 802.11 doesn't specify how frequently it should change, in some implementation it did not change, and it was just the same fixed 24 bits. And even if it was changing, it might be a known sequence and known way of changing, and eventually it would repeat in a few hours in a busy network. Therefore, you only have effectively 40 bits, or effectively 104 bits in the case of a 128-bit key. You only have effectively 40 or 104 bits for your key. Then this key is used with the initialization vector, which is sent in clear text along with the message. So this is a very bad way of doing things, because your key space is not large enough to sufficiently protect against brute force attacks. Then the key is also shared by multiple stations and the access point. This made collisions, which means repetitions of IV, even more likely, which made it easier for attackers to break the whole scheme. Besides the poor key usage, another problem is poor integrity protection. There is an integrity check value, or ICV, which is computed for every frame that's sent with WEP. And the idea behind such schemes, in terms of providing data integrity, is that it should be something that's not easy to compute. And when, let's say, an attacker modifies as little as even 1 bit in the crypto text, the resultant ICV should be difficult to compute. So the attacker cannot simply easily modify the ICV to provide a valid ICV if the attacker changes 1 or more bits in the crypto text. The problem is that the ICV that's actually used in WEP is a linear CRC32. It's not a cryptographic CRC. So it's easy for an attacker to modify 1 or more bits in the crypto text, and then to correspondingly modify the ICV so that it becomes a valid one, and thus this nullifies whatever integrity protection might otherwise have been offered by this ICV. A third problem that WEP faces is that there's no replay protection. There is simply no sequence number in the frames that are sent, and so the receiver has no way to tell whether a frame is genuinely genuinely being transmitted by by a transmitter, or whether it's being replayed from something that an attacker heard previously being sent. This has resulted in many different attacks on WEP. The key stream can be discovered through a passive attack that's waiting for IV collision. IV collision refers to finding two or more frames that use the same IV, initialization vector. Because then we can XOR two frames with the same IV and the same key, and then we get the XOR of the two plaintext messages. Since XOR, when you XOR something with itself, then everything becomes all ones. So this effectively removes the encryption, and you have the XOR of these two plaintext messages. This allows us to do statistical analysis to recover the actual plaintext. Furthermore, such statistical analysis works better as the number of frames with the same IV increases. And there are variations where if we can somehow get some known plaintext to be encrypted and then sent, perhaps coming from a friendly website, friendly to the attacker that is, then the AP might encrypt that and it goes over the air and the attacker can get more information more quickly this way. Besides that attack that I just mentioned, there are others as well. There's numerous attacks actually that have been proposed over the years. Another one is a passive attack to guess the key. There are a number of these. Perhaps very famously, we have FMS, which is based on weaknesses of RC4 and knowing the IV. Another one is correct, which improves on FMS. And then PTW, even better. Generally, with FMS, you need about 6 million frames before you can recover the key. With correct, you only need about 200,000, and this number drops to 60 to 70,000 with PTW. Besides the passive attacks that we've talked about, there are also active attacks that can be used, which can speed up the time needed to break WEP. So if we can actively inject traffic, then we can do things like chop, where we have fake ARP, and we can do things like the fragmentation attack. We can guess a few bytes from similar headers, and then we can recursively send fragments that the AP would combine and then send them back to the network to get more of the key stream